Hello gaming friends, DM Samuel here. Just to give you an intro to this video, I started doing chapter 3 of the core rulebook and decided that I was going to take all of the different classes and make individual videos of them. And so what we have here is the beginner's guide to the Alchemist. Each of these class entries has a full page piece of art at the beginning of each entry, kind of giving you the iconic image of a PC that is of that class. And this is Fumbus. He is the iconic goblin alchemist, okay? And you can see he's got sort of this chintzy little dagger, maybe it's a short sword in his hand, and he's got a vial of something here that he's ready to throw on someone. And you can see on his back he has a keg which looks like it has a wick coming out of it. So very nice, cool piece of art, okay? And so let's talk about the Alchemist. Just as it told us at the beginning, it said it was going to, in every class entry, give us a little bit of information about the class, and it does so up here in the italicized region. Again, this is a more narrative way of talking about the class. Here is the class symbol, or class logo, okay? And then we get the key ability. The key ability for the Alchemist class is Intelligence. So if you're going to play an Alchemist, you want to make sure that any boost that you can, you put it into Intelligence, because you want your Intelligence to be as high as it can be as you are going through the life of the PC. You get 8 hit points plus your Constitution modifier. That comes from your class. You also will get hit points from your Ancestry, and so your Ancestry hit points, your class hit points, and your Con mod are what's going to determine your first level hit points overall, and your class is going to determine how many hit points you get as you level up going on further into the future. And then it tells us narratively, it gives us a little bit of ideas about what this class is about and what it's going to do, what a PC in this class is going to be doing at any given time or in any given mode in this game. Remember, there are 3 gameplay modes in Pathfinder 2. There is encounter mode, which is basically combat. There is exploration mode, which is when you're looking around finding clues and different things. And then there's downtime mode. And so each of these entries splits encounter mode into a combat encounter and a social encounter. And it tells us about the Alchemist that during combat, the Alchemist is lobbing bombs at foes. It's throwing things at people. It's trying to distract them. It is trying to get them to have conditions placed upon them so that they are not able to overcome the Alchemist's allies. Okay? At higher levels, if you, depending on which type of alchemist you choose to be, you might actually allow, you might drink your own alchemical concoction and allow mutations to overcome you, and you might end up becoming more of a melee fighter for that particular combat, depending on what you're doing. So that is also an option. Social encounters, well, you do have knowledge. You've got knowledge of alchemical reagents and how to create things that are non-magical. So just to be very clear, alchemists do not cast spells unless you multiclass. They are not magic. They're not making magical concoctions. Okay. While exploring, they keep an eye out for trouble. They're looking for alchemical reagents, right? They're looking for clues about other alchemists running around and possibly putting challenges and barriers in front of the party as they go. During downtime, this individual PC might be in their own lab making new elixirs or creating bombs or experimenting and trying to further their own knowledge so that they can create new concoctions. And then every entry is going to have this "you might ... and others probably ... section. And it's basically telling us the stereotypical ideas that you might have if you are an alchemist. And this is kind of giving a view into what might have led you to become an alchemist and what the attitudes are around the alchemist. And then the others probably is telling us about what other people think about alchemists, okay? So the "you might" section for alchemists says you might enjoy tinkering with strange formulas and alchemical reagents, often with a single-minded dedication and recklessness that gives others pause. Or you might get a kick out of wreaking havoc with the alchemical concoctions that you've made and enjoy watching things burn, dissolve, freeze, and jolt. Or or I guess you could be any or all or none of these bullet points, by the way. Remember, these are role-playing prompts. There's nothing in here that is a stricture. This is very similar to the ancestry entries, where it gives you an idea of the history and traditions of that particular ancestry and says what that leads to in terms of stereotypes or possible thought patterns and behavioral patterns and demeanor of that particular individual. But you don't have to follow that. It's just a suggestion or a hint. So then it says, others probably think you're some kind of sorcerer or an eccentric wizard, and they don't understand that you don't cast spells, and spellcasters who clumsily dabble in alchemy only heighten that misconception, which you might find hilarious and use that to your advantage, or you might find it cumbersome and annoying. Others probably don't understand your zeal for alchemy. They don't understand it. They don't understand your creativity or your sense of invention, right? Others probably assume that if you haven't caused a catastrophe with your experimentations, then you inevitably will, and they should probably stay away from you to stop that from affecting them in a derogatory way. Again, these are stereotypes. They are prompts. They are ideas for you to have in your head about what you might want to be thinking about as you're role-playing this PC. You, of course, do not have to adhere to any of them. What you do have to adhere to, though, is the proficiencies and the initial information that we get about the class. And what we learn, again, key abilities: intelligence, hit points is 8 plus con mod. Your perception is at the level trained at level 1. So remember, in Pathfinder 2, it's either untrained, trained, expert, master, or legendary. In this case, you start trained in perception. For your saving throws, you are an expert in fortitude, an expert in reflex, and trained in will. For your skills, you automatically receive crafting as a trained skill, and you then can choose 3 other skills, plus however many your intelligence modifier is, more. So if your intelligence is an 18 by the end of character creation, you get crafting, plus 3, plus you would get 4 more, because the modifier for an 18 stat is 4. So you would get 8 skills, crafting being 1, 3 of your choice, and then 4 more of your choice. If your intelligence modifier was only 1, you would get crafting, plus 3 of your choice, plus 1 of your choice. So you would get 5. Okay? You are trained in using simple weapons. You are trained in using alchemical bombs, which for these purposes are considered simple weapons for you. Maybe not for everyone else, but for you they are simple weapons. And then you are trained in unarmed attacks. Your defenses that you're trained in or untrained in, you are trained in light armor, you are trained in medium armor. Since it doesn't have an entry for heavy armor, you are untrained in heavy armor. So in other words, any entry that it does not have anything with means you're untrained. So for example, in the attacks entry, there is also a category of weapons called advanced weapons. And since it doesn't tell you anything about advanced weapons under your attack proficiencies, that means you are untrained. Your defenses, since it doesn't tell you anything about heavy armor, you are untrained in heavy armor. You are trained in light armor and trained in medium armor and trained in unarmored defense. That means wearing no armor. Okay? But you are not trained in heavy armor. That's why they don't mention it. Now, your class DC, that is just a difficulty class that is determined for other individuals if they have to make a save against some ability or something that you have done, usually on account of a class ability or a feat that you have performed, and they need to make a save against it. That save is derived from your class DC. Okay? And so you are trained in your Alchemist class DC. That means since trained, you get to add a 2 plus your level to that DC, right? So in other words, trained in this case, even though it's a class DC, trained means the same thing as it means when we talk about being trained in a skill or in attacks or in defenses. As we move on, it then gives us the Alchemist advancement table. And this advancement table, it's really just it's not really a table. It's really just a short list of everything you get at each level. It's not really laid out like a table that's easy to read. Okay, so let's actually just talk about it real quick. It says at first level, you get your ancestry and your background and any feats and abilities associated with those. You get your initial proficiencies. That's what we just talked about. That's related to the class. You get the ability to perform alchemy. We'll discuss that in a minute. You get a formula book, also we'll discuss in a moment. You choose a research field, we'll discuss that in a second, and you get an alchemist feat, a level 1 feat. Okay, and so it's telling you what you are starting the game with, what your package of proficiencies, abilities, and feats will be, and where it comes from. At second level, when you level up, along with getting extra hit points and whatnot, you will also get another alchemist feat and a skill feat. At third level, when you level up, you'll get your hit points, and then you will get a general feat, and you will get a skill increase. That means you don't choose another skill, but instead you will get an increase in rank for one of your skills that you are either untrained or already trained in. At fifth level, you will get ability boosts. We mentioned how you get them every 5 levels, so you'll get 2 ability boosts to apply to your attributes in any way you choose, and then you get an ancestry feat. Again, we talked about how you get those every 4 levels, right after fifth, and then you'll get a field discovery, which we'll talk about, which is based on the research field that you chose in level 1. You'll get powerful alchemy, which is a new ability, and you'll get a skill increase. So one of your skills will increase in proficiency rank. Now, I'm not going to read this whole table to you, but I just wanted you to understand what it's trying to tell you. It doesn't lay it out in nice columns. It doesn't lay it out and say, it might be nice if they had this with as a table with the level in one column, and then in the next column have skill feats, and just put a little 1 whenever you get another one, right? Or +1 when you get another one. And then general feat, just put a +1 next to the levels where you get a general feat. And then with a column that says, ancestry feat, put a +1 in those. That would be nice, but honestly, it would take up almost the entire page, or take up at least half the page, twice as much space as it's taking up now, if not more. And so it's just a different way to think about it. I might do one after this and flash it up on the screen real quick just so that you could understand what I'm talking about. If you were going to play this class, I suggest you do that, because then you'll have a good idea of how everything is going to come to you as you go through the class and you play this character from levels 1 to 20. Okay, so now it's going to tell us about the class features of the Alchemist in text instead of in table. So basically it's telling us all of these things on the table, but now it's going to explain and describe the ones that are so far have not been described. It reminds us that we are going to get our ancestry abilities and feats and the different skills and abilities that we get from our background. Remember, the background is going to give you a couple of boosts, and it's going to give you a skill, and it's going to give you a lore skill, right? And then it's going to give you some kind of feat or some other extra bonus of some sort, okay? And then we get our initial proficiencies. That's what we talked about. That's your attacks and your defenses and what your perception is and what your saving throws are, okay? All that we already talked about. Then it's going to explain to us what alchemy means. And so alchemy is the ability you get at first level if you are an alchemist. This is based on your class. And alchemy just means that you understand the interactions between different substances in the world, and you can take those substances and mix them together and create, basically you're crafting items that are able to have a certain outcome. Sometimes they are explosive, so you're creating a combustible item. Sometimes they are elixirs, so they are going to affect someone's health in some way. And sometimes they are poisonous, so they might poison you or an enemy. Okay, and basically you can think of this as this person is a chemist. Okay, they know how these things interact. They know when you mix a certain amount of reagent 1 with a certain amount of reagent 2, and you put them together, you are going to create a situation where something is going to come from that. Okay. So, along with this knowledge, basically alchemy means you have the knowledge to do those things. And you also gain the feat Alchemical Crafting. Now, the Alchemical Crafting feat basically says that you can use the crafting skill to create alchemical items. And along with that, that means that you get some formulas. That is, you don't just keep these things in your head, you actually write them down, probably in a secret code or a secret language, but you write them down in your formula book. Okay? And that is your catalog of the things you know how to make. Okay, so at first level, you get 4 of those because of the Alchemical Crafting feat. Okay, and also because of the feat, you can create those, you can make those. Now, here's where it gets a little bit more interesting, or a little slightly bit complex, or a little bit harder to understand. You also get an ability called infused reagents. And here's what this says. It says that you infuse reagents with your own alchemical essence. And that allows you to create alchemical items at no cost. So if you were to flip back to the back of the end of the book into the crafting and treasure chapter, you would see that to craft even the most basic alchemical item, it costs money and ingredients. But as an alchemist, you actually don't have to pay the cost to make those alchemical items. Each day during preparation, so the way that the day kind of goes is you end your rest and everyone kind of does their preparations for the day. So the cleric will be praying for their spells, and the wizard will be studying his spell book and memorizing the spells he wants to use that day, right? Choosing spell slots and whatnot. And the ranger might be, cleaning his weapons and prepping, and the druid might be praying and paying homage to the earth or something like that, right? Everyone has normal sort of morning preparation duties. And for the alchemist, their normal preparation is to create a batch, actually a number of batches, of infused reagents. That is, they create sort of little chemical vials of starter material equal to your level plus your intelligence modifier. So let's pretend like your modifier is 18. That's a 4 plus your level 1. So you get to create 5 batches of alchemical infused reagents, okay? And you can use these reagents either by crafting things now in the morning, or by holding them back and using quick alchemy, which we'll talk about in a second, okay? So in other words, let me put it like this. During your morning preparations, what you're doing is you're setting up for your experiment, so to speak. Remember, this is kind of like a chemist. So imagine they have vials and test tubes, and they've got little bits of reagents. And what they're doing is measuring those out perfectly so that they can quickly combine them later. Or they're measuring them out perfectly, and they are combining them now and taking great pains to create concoctions that they can use later on in the day. Okay, if they're creating them now so they can use them later, that's called advanced alchemy. And if they're setting them up so that they can quickly mix them when they want to during the middle of the day without having to know ahead of time which one they would need, that's called quick alchemy. So those are the 2 ways that you would use your infused reagents. Okay, now for some people this is kind of an odd thing. It's kind of weird to call it infused reagents. What does that even mean? How does the alchemist themselves infuse the reagent into their own, how are they putting their own essence into the vials? Their essence becomes the catalyst for making these reagents work. Think of it like this. This is kind of weird. It is kind of weird. But remember, this is a fantasy world too, so it's okay that it's weird. But if you really need to understand it, think of it like this. If you've ever had somebody that you love, cook a really great meal for you, and you've had chicken before, or you've had lasagna before, or you've had stew before, or you've had some kind of nice broth or soup before, but when that person cooked it for you, it tasted so good, it was almost hard to believe that you were eating chicken noodle soup or that you were eating regular lasagna, because they made it so well. That's what it would mean to infuse that recipe with your own essence to just make it perfect. That's what's happening here. That's how they're infusing these reagents with their own kind of essence, right? Okay, now they make their daily preparations. They've created these batches. So let's say 5. You created 5 batches. Okay, now these batches only work for 24 hours. Okay, they only work for 24 hours. So as you make your daily preparations, any infused reagents that you didn't use, okay, they're no longer active. They're destroyed. So you might as well just dump them out. Okay, it's like a soda that's gone flat, right? It no longer has the thing in it that makes it bubbly. Okay. Now these are physical objects, but they can't be preserved. That's why they go bad. Okay, so you have to keep redoing them every day to make them perfect, because these are precisely measured items with the precise exact amount of whatever the ingredients are. Okay? Now, advanced alchemy, as I mentioned before, is what happens when, during your daily preparations, instead of just creating the bits that you can mix together later, you actually spend those bits right away to create alchemical items. Okay? Now, to do this, you don't make a crafting check. Normally, if a person who is not an alchemist class, if they were using crafting to create an alchemical item, which they may possibly be able to do, they would have to make a crafting check. You don't have to make a crafting check because you're an alchemist already. Okay? And you don't have to spend days and days and days doing this. Some of those recipes, they take days or a week to do, so they have to be made during downtime. This is what you do in the morning as you're prepping for your alchemist daily routine. Okay? So you create them. Now, advanced alchemy, your advanced alchemy level is equal to your class level. So at first level, you are a level 1 advanced alchemist. And so for each batch of infused reagents that you spend, for advanced alchemy, you can make an alchemical item of your advanced alchemy level or lower. So at first level, you can only make first level items. At second level, you can make first and second level items. At fifth level, you can make 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, but you cannot make 6. Okay? Once you have made these items, they are good for 24 hours. Now, quick alchemy means that you take your items and you prep them at the beginning of the day during your preparations, but you don't mix them into actual alchemical items yet. You don't make the alchemical items, you're just making the reagents. And quick alchemy gives you the ability to use the quick alchemy action. And that's what we see at the bottom of this page. This is a one action activity. And basically what it says is you have to have at least one batch of infused reagents that you made. And you have to have a formula for that alchemical item in your formula book. And you have to have some alchemist tools, or you have to be wearing a bandolier with alchemist tools or something like that, right? Or they have to be in your backpack, you have to be in your hand somehow, because you're going to mix these real quick, right? And so you swiftly mix up something, and this, in this case, when you mix this thing up, okay, you create a single alchemical item of your advanced alchemy level or lower, same as I just said for the, right, for anything you're making, it can only be of your level or lower, okay? And it has to be in your formula book, okay? And you don't spend the normal monetary cost, okay? And you don't make a crafting check. This is why you're the alchemist, because you're so good you don't even have to check for this level item, okay? Now, here's the thing, though. When you just did this quick alchemy, this thing only is good because you just quickly threw it together. It's only active until the start of your next turn. So you would need to do this action. Let's say you want to mix up a quick healing elixir, okay? And you need to mix that up really quickly. You take one action at the start of your turn. Remember, you get 3 turns per action. You use quick alchemy to mix it up. You use your second action to stride over to your comrade who needs the elixir, and then you use your third action to feed them the elixir, okay? Or to hand it to them or whatever, okay? And that's how that works, okay? One thing that I didn't point out was the other drawback to using quick alchemy is when you spend a batch of reagents, you only make one thing, and you have to use it within 6 seconds, basically, within that round, okay? So it really is a very quick, like, boom, boom, I did that, and now I'm using it. It's no good after 2 more seconds, okay? It's just make it and throw it, right? Or make it and hand it off. When you use batches of your infused reagents to create something using advanced alchemy at the beginning of the day, for each batch that you spend, you actually get 2 of that item. So you're being so precise that you can stretch out each batch to make 2 items. So you can make twice as much using advanced alchemy, but you have to know what you're going to need ahead of time. Okay, and so quick alchemy, so, you know, the way to do this, then the way to think about it is you're going to want to make some early on that you know you're going to use during the day, and then you might want to leave a batch or 2 of infused reagents to be mixed later in a quick alchemy in case there's a situation or an event that you didn't know was going to happen. Okay, so that's how that alchemy works. Now let's talk about your formula book. You get a formula book, and It's a standard sort of formula book, and it has 2 common first level alchemical items of your choice in it. That is the recipes for those 2 items, in addition to any of those that you gained from alchemical crafting. So the alchemical crafting feat gives you 4. So formula book here, this ability at first level gives you 2 more. Okay, so now you have 6. All right. And then you're going to get some from your research field, which we'll talk about in a minute. Okay. Now, every time you gain a level, you can add formulas to the book because you're learning as you go, and you might find other formulas, and you might learn other formulas from other people, and you might buy additional formulas from a shop in a new town or something like that. Okay. Then, as you are a first level alchemist, you also will have to choose your research field. Now, this is kind of like the subclass for the alchemist. So they don't really call them subclasses in Pathfinder 2e, but I know that a lot of people just kind of refer to them as subclasses. So basically, what this is saying is, when you're a first level alchemist and you're making this alchemist, you have to choose a research field, and you really can't change your research field as you go through time, okay? You get a choice of 3 different research fields. You get bomber, chirurgeon, and mutagenist, okay? The bomber specializes in things that explode and catch on fire, okay? And lobbing those, right? Throwing them at people, at enemies, right? And they deal splash damage. So you create things that you throw at enemies, and they splash onto anyone next to those enemies, and so you create lots of havoc that way. The chirurgeon is proficient in making different other formulas, things that help people, lesser antidotes, lesser anti-plagues, which help you overcome diseases, and minor elixirs of life, which is like a healing potion. Okay, antidotes like antidote is anti-poison, anti-venom, right? Anti-plague is like anti-disease, and elixir of life is like a healing potion. Okay, so you focus on that type of ability, right? So the support role there is, instead of making a bunch of bombs to throw at your enemies, you're actually making things that are going to help your allies. Okay. Now, what happens is, as long as you have a medicine proficiency, trained or better, you can use your crafting check instead of your medicine check. And as an alchemist, your crafting check is going to go higher and higher and higher all the time. Okay. Because you're going to want to keep crafting things better and better. So you're going to always probably going to make your skill proficiency, when your skill bump happens and you can go from trained to expert in a skill, you're probably going to choose crafting. You don't want to have to be forced to use medicine. Okay, so you could use that crafting check instead of your medicine check. As long as you're already trained a little bit in medicine, you can actually just use crafting from now on. Okay. Now, anytime there would have been a medicine check needed. Now, a mutagenist, they are experts at creating these odd concoctions that cause temporary mutagenic transformations of individuals. Okay, so you get 2 first-level mutagens in your formula book, in addition to the other things you got from your initial alchemical crafting feat. Okay. And you also now learn a free action, and that free action is called Mutagenic Flashback. And basically it says that once per day, you experience a brief resurgence of a mutagen, and you can choose a mutagen that you've consumed since your last daily preparation, and you gain the effects of that mutagen. So this mutagenic stuff that you're making is for you yourself to imbibe, and then it creates a mutation in yourself that it now enhances some aspect of what you do. It either makes you more powerful or whatever. Okay. And then, so you can actually revisit that. If you've already done one of those that day, you can revisit that again for a free action once per day. Okay. And then it reminds us that you are going to get a feat at first level, and then you're going to also get a class feat, an alchemist feat, at every even numbered level thereafter. You're going to get skill feats at second level and every 2 levels after that. Okay, remember, this is just the format of explaining everything about the class. Okay, if we keep going down, you're going to get a general feat at 3rd level, and every 4 levels after, you're going to get a skill increase. That means you don't add a skill, but you increase your proficiency in that skill from trained to expert, in this case, at 3rd level. And then at 7th level, you get a skill increase to master, and then at 15th to legendary, right? You get an ability boost at level 5 and every 5 levels thereafter. You get an ancestry feat at 5th level and then every 4 levels thereafter. You get a field discovery at 5th level, which is dependent on which field or subclass that you chose. If you chose Bomber, now at 5th level, when using your advanced alchemy to make bombs during your preparations for the day, now you can make 3 instead of two bombs when you make a batch of bombs, okay? So when you make a batch of infused reagents, if you're making 5 of those before 5th level, you could use all 5 of those to make 10 bombs, because you make 2 per batch, right? Now, as a 5th level bomber, you will suddenly be able to make 3 for every batch of infused reagents, so you can make 15 of those. Okay. If you're a chirurgeon, you don't get that. Instead, you get to make elixirs of life during your daily preparations. You can make 3 of those instead of 2, right? Because that would have been what you were doing. You might have made 10. Now at 5th level, you can now make 15 of those. Okay. And the mutagenist, similar kind of thing. Instead of getting 2, you get 3 mutagens, 3 mutagenic alchemical items instead of 2, just for the same input. Okay. At 5th level, you also get an ability called Powerful Alchemy, which means that the alchemical items you create are particularly potent if you're using Quick Alchemy. And so if you create an item that allows a saving throw, you can change its normal difficulty class, its normal DC, to your class DC. And at this point, you're 5th level, and you begin trained in your class DC, so now your class DC is probably going to be higher than the generic DC for any random alchemical item, okay? So that's a pretty good benefit. At 7th level, you get what's called Alchemical Weapon Expertise, and so you've trained to more effectively wield the weapons you find in your lab, so your proficiency rank for simple weapons, alchemical bombs, and unarmed attacks go from trained to expert. So at 7th level, you bump up, okay, to a higher sort of rank in your attacks, right? Chances are you're probably not a melee character, but maybe you are. Maybe you're a mutagenist and you do a lot of melee. This actually bumps those things up. Iron Will, an ability you get at 7th level as an alchemist, and it means that your proficiency for will saves goes from trained to expert. At 7th level, you also get Perpetual Infusions, and that is the case where you have learned to create infusions that provide a really large supply of simple items. So you gain the ability to create 2 first-level alchemical items using Quick Alchemy without spending a batch of infused reagents. So you get those for free. Now you're using your essence itself to just create 2 items with nothing else. Okay? The items you select, of course, depend on your research field or subclass, and so if you're a bomber, you can choose from a certain specific set of bombs. If you're a chirurgeon, you choose from the antidotes or antiplagues, and if you're a mutagenist, you choose from a certain subset of mutagenic alchemical items. Okay. At 9th level, you get Alchemical Expertise, so basically that makes it so that the effectiveness of your concoctions is increased, so your alchemist class DC increases to expert instead of trained. At 9th level, you get alertness, which basically increases your perception to expert level in training. At 9th level, you also get double brew, so when you use Quick Alchemy, instead of spending a batch to create a single item, you can spend 2 batches to make 2 items, but that's in 1 action, right? Remember, Quick Alchemy is 1 action, so even though it's costing you the same in terms of infused reagents, you're using 1 action to make 2 of them, right? And they don't have to be the same thing. You could actually make an elixir of life and a bomb if you wanted to, okay? At 11th level, you get Juggernaut, which is an ability that makes it so that your fortitude save increases to master level, because you started at expert, okay? It goes up to master, which is the next level up. And also, when you roll a success, it bumps up to a critical success automatically. And just a key here, 2 of these abilities you're going to see a lot in several different classes. Alertness is always going to be the same thing. So you'll see in other classes, if they get alertness as a class ability at some level, it might not be at the same level. Here it's at 9th level. It might be at 7th level, or it might be at 11th level for a different class. But if it's the same, if it's alertness, then it is going to be the same. It's going to be a proficiency increase of perception to expert. And Juggernaut has a similar thing. Some classes get it at 9 and some get it at 13. Some don't get it at all. But if it's called Juggernaut, if you see Juggernaut, it's the same thing. Okay? So that is where your proficiency rank for Fortitude goes up to Master. And if you roll a Fort save it and you succeed, it automatically goes to a crit success. Perpetual Potency is something you get at 11th level, and that means that your perpetual infusions improve. And so you can use Quick Alchemy to create more powerful items, again at no cost. And the items that you select, of course, depend on which research field you chose. Bombers get the moderate versions of the bombs that they chose for perpetual infusions. What am I talking about, perpetual infusions? Well, that was this one. Remember, they got at 7th level. You got to create 2 first-level alchemical items with Quick Alchemy without spending any batches of reagents. So Perpetual Potency means you can still do that thing, and now you get the more potent version of those. You're still making it without spending any reagents, okay, with no cost. And then you get at 13th level a greater field discovery, and of course that depends on which research field you chose. Again, remember, that doesn't change throughout your career here. If you chose bomber at 1st level, you're bomber the whole time. Okay, and so in this case, bombers can now increase the splash on their bombs. Chirurgeons get Quick Alchemy to create an elixir of life that now actually has the person drinking that elixir get the maximum number of hit points possible for that elixir back instead of rolling, okay? Mutagenist means that if you imbibe a second mutagenic alchemical concoction, you actually get the effects of both. Normally, when you imbibe one, you get those effects. If you take another one right away, the effects of the first one are wiped out, and you only see the effects of the second one. In this case, you now get the effects of both of them, okay? At 13th level, your expertise in defense goes up in such that your medium armor goes up to, and light armor as well, and unarmored defense all go up to expert. You still don't have any heavy armor expertise, okay? You still don't have any heavy armor training or anything like that. You're still untrained in heavy armor, but now you are expert in medium and light armor and in unarmored defense if you didn't want to wear armor. At 13th level, you also get a weapon specialization so that you get 2 additional damage dealt every time you use a weapon or an unarmed attack in a weapon that you are an expert with. And you, at this point, are expert level in all your weapons, okay? In the weapons that you already had proficiency for. At 15th level, you get Alchemical Alacrity, so your comfort in concocting items is such that you can now create 3 at a time. When you do Quick Alchemy, you can spend up to 3 batches and make 3 alchemical items, and they don't have to be the same. You now automatically stow one when you create it, okay? Evasion, you also get at 15th level, and that is evasion you're going to see in some other classes, and it's always the same. It is the case where the reflex save goes up to master, and when you roll a success on your reflex save, you get a crit success bump automatically. 17th level, you get Alchemical Mastery, so you now have the Alchemist DC raised to master from expert. 17th level, you also get Perpetual Perfection, where you can use Quick Alchemy to create even more powerful items at no cost. So, of course, Bomber, you get the bigger versions of those. Chirurgeon, you get the greater versions of those. And Mutagenist, you get the greater. So there are, for example, Minor Elixir of Life, Greater Elixir of Life, for example. Okay. Medium Armor Mastery comes at 19th level, so your light and medium armor and your unarmored defense all go to Master. Okay. All right. And that's it for the basic sort of flow of the class. Now, what we haven't really talked about are the feats. And I'm not going to go over every single feat because that would make this video 8 hours long. And I don't want an 8-hour video. And so if we just look at these feats, you're going to see that there are, first of all, also some great art. Look at that art. That's fantastic. He's running and he drank some kind of mutagenic thing and he's throwing this bomb here, and you could tell he already threw some bombs. I mean, this is a fantastic picture. Fantastic picture. But you see there's about 4 first level feats, okay? And you're going to see about 3 or 4 second level feats, and you're going to see that as we go. In other words, there's not 50 feats for you to choose from at first level. You're going to make a pretty concise decision as you go, okay? So even though you're getting lots of different items and abilities, you're still making a few choices that are really important, but it's not super duper overwhelming. I mean, it feels overwhelming probably because I just read you 19 levels worth of abilities. But remember, that's why at the beginning of this chapter, as I move back here, they give you this advancement table so that you can see at which level you get which ability. Okay? also, before we leave the Alchemist, I do want to point out that each of these class entries provides you with 1 or 2 and sometimes 3 sample characters that are alchemists. So you could see up here it says sample alchemist. In other words, this isn't showing you it's not telling you you have to do this. This sample alchemist is a chirurgeon alchemist. It's not telling you that if you choose chirurgeon as your research field, this is what you have to do. This is telling you that here's a sample of what someone might choose if they were going to make a chirurgeon style alchemist. They prioritize intelligence and wisdom. They, on the third hand, increase constitution or dexterity, depending on what direction they want to go. But those are the 4 they want to focus on. So you kind of downplay strength and you downplay charisma and you try to focus on those other 4. You get crafting, diplomacy, medicine, nature, occultism, religion, society, and survival. Why medicine? Because of the chirurgeon's ability to use crafting instead of the medicine skill to heal things, right? Their research field, of course, is chirurgeon. That's why this is a sample chirurgeon. Their starting feat is alchemical savant. That's the one they chose out of the choice of 4. And then at higher levels, they might choose these. Okay. Now, this is just an example. It is not telling you that you have to choose that to be a chirurgeon. What it's saying is, hey, if you want to test out a chirurgeon, here's a real quick build. So you can go and make one of these and then see how it plays, right? And then you might decide to do something different. Okay. Okay, and then it also, so let's look at Alchemical Savant. That's the feat that sample chirurgeon chose. Alchemical Savant says you can identify alchemical items quickly. When using the crafting skill to identify alchemy on an alchemical item you hold, you can do so as a single action, which has the concentrate and manipulate traits instead of spending 10 minutes. In other words, normally you have to wait for an exploration mode to spend 10 minutes to do that. You can do it as a single action during a combat if you needed to. And if you have the formula for that item already in your book, you get a +2 bonus to identify it because you're probably familiar with it, okay? And you can't crit fail it because if you crit fail, it bumps up to being just a normal failure instead, okay? And that kind of makes sense. If you're a chirurgeon, you might be often looking at alchemical things to see if they're poisonous or if they're going to mutate someone or if they're going to be harmful. And so it makes sense that that person might choose that feat, okay? Next, it also gives us a sample alchemist who is a bomber. And so you're going to see that they prioritize the same 4 attributes, but in a different order. There, of course, intelligence is first because that is the key ability for this class. But then instead of wisdom or con, they do dexterity next. And then con, and then wisdom last. Okay, and of course, then they ignore strength and they ignore charisma, which is the same 2 things that the other sample alchemist ignored, but for different reasons, right? And in a different order. The skills that they would take: acrobatics, arcana, crafting, deception, intimidation, society, stealth, and thievery. Notice there's no medicine there because they're not going to be focusing on elixirs. They might make one once in a while, but that's not their focus. They are going to choose bomber. They're going to choose quick bomber as their feat that they choose at first level, and then these feats here at higher levels. Let's take a look at quick bomber real quick, and you'll see that quick bomber is a 1 action activity. It's a level 1 feat that lets you keep your bombs in easy to reach pouches, and you draw them without even thinking, and you interact to draw them, and then you can strike with it. So you can throw it or hit somebody with it, okay? And so that makes sense for the bomber. Okay, so then they show us a mutagenist. And the mutagenist prioritizes intelligence and strength. That's different from the other 2. Constitution also helps. That's the 3rd one. And then wisdom. So it's still ignoring charisma. Alchemists are not charismatic, apparently. But instead of dexterity, it's focusing on strength. And the reason for that is that a mutagenist is going to take a mutation alchemical reaction and probably use it to help themselves attack, and maybe in melee. So they take athletics, arcana, crafting, intimidation, occultism, society, stealth, and survival. Their research field is mutagenist, and they choose alchemical familiar. And so there we go. So that is what it is showing us. And along with this, it also gives us a sample formula book that I just wanted to mention real quick. At first level, you get your formula book. You choose any first level common alchemical items to put into your formula book. But if you wanted something that was very standard, you might choose the Fundamentals of Alchemy, which is popular for teaching beginning alchemists about alchemy at all. And so it contains the formulas for Lesser Acid Flask, Lesser Alchemist Fire, Lesser Antidote, Lesser Anti-Plague, Lesser Cheetah's Elixir, Lesser Elixir of Life, and Lesser Tanglefoot Bag, and also Lesser Smokestick. So those would be the formulas that you would find in the basic training manual for alchemists, okay? And so, again, this is not a stricture. It's a sort of role-playing prompt that says, hey, if you actually had formal training and that's how you learned your craft, you probably learned several of these alchemical formulas from the Fundamentals of Alchemy, which is the most popular mainstream alchemical teaching thing. Okay? And so that's the end of the Alchemist as a class.